Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Mary Grace. This is Real Talk with Mary Grace, and we are live today. It is the 4th of April, 2022, and we have a special guest with us on the show. I will introduce her in just a minute. A little bit of housekeeping first. As you're coming into the show, please share, follow the channel, hit the like button, tag people, and share this into groups. Please, as you're coming in, say hello. We're going to wait a couple of seconds for all of the notifications to go out. If you're on Facebook and you want to save my channel, send it to yourself in a private message so that when you go to look for me, you can just go to your private messages and click on the channel. So today I want to introduce to you our very special and esteemed guest. We have with us Liz Yore. Liz is an international child advocate attorney. She is a grassroots activist, and she is a frequent guest on Steve Bannon's War Room. Welcome to the show, Liz. Thank you so much for being here. We are delighted to have you.
Thank you, Mary Grace. I'm delighted to be with you today.
It's just great to have you here. I want to jump right into our discussion because we have so much to talk about. And this is really, we're living through historic times. There's just unprecedented, amazing things happening. There's also unprecedented evil being revealed. And this is a topic that we want to go into today. Before we go into our topic, I do want to say to my listeners, we will be talking about sensitive topics. There is a chance that you or somebody that you know has been a victim of trafficking, of abuse, of exploitation. And if you're in that situation, I just want to give you a warning before we start this show that we will be talking about sensitive topics. So if this is a show that you are unable to partake in, we totally understand. And we do not want you to put yourself in a position that is going to trigger and bring you into a situation that is very extremely difficult. So that's just the disclaimer with the show. And think about that before you share it or tag people as well. We don't want people to be blindsided. So with that being said, Liz, the topic of the day right now is critically important to the future, not only of our nation, but to the world. And that is the current Supreme Court nominee that is being brought up for a vote this week. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation, who this is, and the work that you've been doing and the research that you have uncovered on this person, Ketanji Brown Jackson?
Sure. She is a nominee to the Supreme Court, and she is the first Black woman. She is a graduate of the Harvard Law School and Harvard undergraduate. She was a DC judge on the DC circuit, and also for the last year has been on the DC appellate court. Judge Jackson, as we all know, President Biden had suggested that this was his historic moment in nominating a Black woman to the Supreme Court. There are no Black women sitting on the Supreme Court. So this is certainly a moment in history where the candidate herself came before Congress, and really as a result of the research done by Article 3 Project, which is Mike Davis, who did a lot of researching, a big deep dive, I should say, into her record of sentencing. As she has, about 100 people over the years that she has sentenced. 8 of those sentences involved child sex predators. 7 of them were convicted defendants in cases that involved large caches of child pornography. Child pornography, and let me just step back a bit. Child pornography in the United States under federal and state law, it's a crime. It is, these are child sex abuse images, and everywhere but the United States, they don't refer to it as child pornography. It's described as child sex abuse images. These defendants who appeared before Judge Jackson Brown were had enormous amounts of child pornography. And just to give you some idea, these are not babies in the bathtub pictures. These are, in many respects, um, rape videos, torture videos of violent, really abusive rape videos of children and, in some cases, toddlers. So, the worst of the worst. It is looking into the pit of hell. And to give the audience some idea of how extensive this problem is in the United States. When I was general counsel at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I was involved in creating the cyber tip line. And because once the advent of the internet became really functional throughout the land, throughout the world,
Mhm.
we started realizing that the predators were no longer sending child pornography through the mails, but not developing, distributing it, manufacturing it using the internet. And so, in order to really be aware of where they're sending these videos and getting complaints, because we were getting lots of complaints, we created this cyber tip line. And since 1998, there have been 87 million reports from the United States of people who may turn on their computer or phone and all of a sudden see what appears to be child pornography, a child in a sexually compromised position being abused. There is this vehicle, the cyber tip line. You can call 1-800 the lost and report it. And now there is a law that all ESPs, service providers, are required under law, mandated under law, that as their technicians and computer execs go through, looking at various computers, and if they run across it, they are mandated to report it to the Cyber Tip Line. Cyber Tip Line and the National Center is a nonprofit, but it is funded by the U.S. Department of Justice. That when they receive these reports, they will send them out to law enforcement. They will tag these reports. They will try and identify who these children are, because many of these pictures are repeat pictures. And as a result, the National Center in I- in nine, in 2020, they had 21 million reports of child pornography in 2020. And to capture how many, just how this is an explosion of a problem, in 2021, the cyber tip line received 29.3 million reports of child pornography.
In
So it's
2020, in 2020.
yeah, yes, from 21 to 29 million in 1 year alone. So it's exponentially exploding. And
Yeah, I wanna interject something here because I in 2020, during the pandemic,
mhm,
people couldn't travel, and I was listening in on a State Department briefing on this very issue, and they were saying something incredibly disturbing, which is that the people who had previously done what is known as sex tourism, to the Philippines, Thailand, things like that, that was no longer possible, and so what they were doing was they were actually streaming the sex acts over the internet, and these tourists were actually, subscribing to these channels, and it was even harder to catch them, because it was hard they didn't have images stored on their computers, they were live streaming it, and I was shocked by that. Are you aware? Is that something that you've delved into?
yes, live streaming of child rape is a sad fact. It's of course grown exponentially, like all of these sex crimes.
Yeah.
And they log on to these. They have, this is the dark web. That's oftentimes very difficult to intercede on and intervene in for law enforcement. And while the live rape of a child is being live streamed around the world. These for an amount of money, of course, but for additional amount of money, these viewers can say, "I would like this to be done." I would, they have their bizarre, sick fetishes that they can request the actual perpetrator to perform on the child.
And
So
this
this
in
is the
real
worst of
time.
the worst, right?
Yeah.
It is, it really went on before COVID. So it's,
Sure.
COVID, of course, forced it because they weren't able to travel. Now they're back traveling again.
Mhm.
So the, altogether, the cyber tip line has identified in the 325 million images that are stored at the cyber tip line, only only 19,000 child victims have been identified. So your audience can understand that there's a small fraction of the victims have been identified. And so as a result, this is a very difficult, it's very difficult to rescue children out of this situation.
Mm.
And many victims will tell you, many victims of child pornography who know that they were being filmed will tell you that it is just an the oftentimes knowing that millions of people forever will be viewing these videos is a re-victimization every time, and that many of these victims have great difficulty recovering because of the existence of their abuse being viewed around the world
Over and over and over again. Yeah.
over and
I
over again. So this is not, people need to understand this is not a victimless crime. Just pictures. They're not, this is, you see, you hear this, from, many people, the radical left. These are just pictures. In fact, to this point, to your original question,
Mhm.
Judge Katanji Brown Jackson said, well, some of these guys aren't pedophiles. I don't know where she got that idea. They're not, they like to collect um, images and they're lonely. And so they really have no sexual motivation in collecting uh, child sex, rape. I mean, it's just an absurd statement. It's a horrifying statement that a federal judge, and she's during the sentencing, she made these statements, especially with an 18. There was an 18-year-old defendant. This is one of the cases that
Mhm.
there's a great deal of discussion. The Weeks case, an 18-year-old defendant who had a huge cache of videos and um, sexual images of children as young as 8 being abused, sexually abused. And her comment in sentencing, first of all, she went on and on apologizing to the defendant, who was 18 years old, that she had to sentence him. It was, and then she went on to say, really, she was considering the mitigating factors is that since the children in the videos, the victims, were 8 years old and he was 18, that he was really just viewing images of his peers. I mean, it's shocking beyond belief that
Yeah.
a federal judge would make that kind of connection as an excuse to lower the sentence. So, but she did. She gave him only 3 months, and both the parole officer, the prosecutor recommended significant time. In the Weeks case, she ignored those recommendations and went below the mandatory minimum range of guidelines, which are placed in the law,
Mhm.
and gave him 3 months. And also,
Just to be clear, as you're talking about this, these are documented cases that came on her
yes,
docket. There is
yes,
25 years of documented case
mhm.
files. These are not, baseless allegation. I just wanna be clear about that. These
No,
are
no,
the receipts are there, they are on the website,
yes,
Article 3 project.
correct.
They're
That's
they're
correct.
listed on there. This is not speculation, guys. Just wanna be clear. Sorry
And
to
it was,
interrupt you. Okay.
yeah, and it was discussed, on C-SPAN when they were questioning her.
Mhm.
This defendant, she also incredibly said, "Well, you graduated from high school, so I'm going to take that in consideration of your sentencing." My mind as a former prosecutor, as somebody who has been involved in this issue for 30 years, an 18-year-old who is at a young age collecting and storing and seeking these images is really a great threat because he has many, many years ahead of him, with computer use.
Yeah.
And so, in any event, that was not in anybody's mind a mitigating factor. And in fact, I mean, the audience can go to any U.S. attorney's office, go and click on their news links. You will see that they're college professors, that there's teachers collecting child pornography and being charged. All sorts of people with dramatic, very extensive diplomas and education. So education is irrelevant. But she considered it, high school graduation degree. So she did go out of her way in the Weeks case to apologize to him and gave him 3 months, to the horror of the prosecutor, the parole officers. Now, what she also did not do, which is also kind of standard operating procedure, is to restrict his computer use. There's ability to put a monitor on through probation. She didn't do that. So he was sentenced to 3 months in jail. And interestingly, I think it was the Washington Post tracked him down and to ask him about this case. And he said, when I got to jail, all the other child porn defendants were like, "Oh, why are you mad at her?" Because he was mad he was sentenced.
Yeah.
You got off easy. We're here 5-6 years. So even the other child porn defendants knew that this was a grossly inadequate
Yeah.
sentence. Well, sure enough, because people have to realize that, especially in these cases, there's not only deterrence as a factor in sentencing, but also punishment. And the stiffer the sentence, especially with a young man who has to realize that his actions not only harm the victims, but are just you sex offender for the rest of your life, or many times 10-20 years. He reoffended and
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
back on the computer looking for child pornography. In fact, I think trying to solicit child pornography from law enforcement who go undercover. There were some other cases that have been uncovered. A sex offender, not just a child pornographer, but a sex offender who
Okay,
she.
I wanna stop for just a second because I
Sure.
I wanna make sure we define some terms here. There's a lot of, sort of insider lingo because you're an attorney, and I wanna make sure people understand what we're talking about.
Mhm.
So, a sex offender, a consumer of child pornography, soliciting child pornography, can we just define those terms so that we understand,
Sure.
people to be very clear on this?
Sure.
Sex offender.
So, all, somebody who possesses child pornography and is convicted of that is required in most states to be registered as a sex offender on the state sex offender registry.
So they're
So,
victimizing children, either
by collecting pictures.
just by collecting pictures.
Yes,
So
yes.
that is that not including the people who are convicted for the actual act? What
And
what
we'll call those for they also are sex offenders, but for purposes of clarity, we'll call them a hands-on offender. Hands-on offender. So that would be an individual who
interesting.
actually was physically raping, sexually molesting.
Oh, we're losing the feed here. Can you say that again? We lost you there for a second. You're freezing. Okay, yeah, say that again.
The hands-on offender is an individual who physically, sexually molests, rape an individual. So both the child pornographer, possessor, as well as a hand abuser, all fall under sex offenders. And in
Okay.
most
Okay,
states,
so it yeah. How
there.
okay. The feed is freezing a little bit. I'm gonna take this opportunity to ask you another question. How is that different from a pedophile? So a sex offender, a hands-on sex offender, these are people who either possess, the material or they've actually committed the crime against a child. Uh, how do you define a pedophile?
Well, pedophile is a psychological diagnosis. Means that you in prepubescent children. A pedophile would be one, certainly, obviously, one who is looking for of children being sexually assaulted, raped at the age of 2 or 3, because literally these guys will say looking for girls ages 4, and then they list the fetishes, the abuse, whatever they're looking at. So these pedophiles oftentimes have individual preferences, whether boys or girls, certain ages they're looking for, but the overall is just a sexual interest in children, um, and um, and so that's a psychological term that's used. Now, interestingly, there's not been a lot of research and study done on these individuals who are both possessors of child pornography as well as the hands-on abusers. But there was a study at the Butner Federal Prison in where they have a sex offender program. They have
Mhm.
both the abusers, the hands-on abusers there who are serving a sentence, federal sentences, and then they have a category of the child pornography possessors. No evidence of hands-on, merely convicted of possessing child abuse images. Okay, so you have these two categories that
Yeah.
were being studied in the Butner study. And what they found, and I don't have the exact specifics, but I think it really highlights the kind of individuals that came before Judge Jackson, the kind of people that we are dealing with in
Mhm.
this
Mm.
dark web, is the ones who were child possessors who had they had no cases, crimes, nothing, a clean history, no child abuse whatsoever. They brought them into therapy sessions,
Mhm.
and they were told that in these therapy sessions, you would be able to really have a benefit, get some benefit time served if you came into these therapy
Yeah.
sessions of work. And they all talked about it, but none of them claimed that they had any sexual abuse victims that they had hands on.
Okay. Okay, they're just
So
consuming the content.
right. So then they said, well, guys, you're going to have your chance to be honest. We're going to put you on a polygraph. So do you want to come forward now and say, how many victims? Did you have any victims?
Mhm.
Well, with the threat of a polygraph test, um, all of a sudden they started admitting these child pornographer
Interesting.
possessors that, oh yes, I had abused the kids down the street, or yes, but just one or just two. Then they
Interest
put then they put them on a polygraph, and they found that the child pornography possessors had, you know, 10, 20 victims. But there was never any evidence, never any police reports, no victims coming forward. And it was a range
Yeah,
of additional
yeah.
victims. So this is the issue. The issue is that, number one, we know only a small 1, 2, 3% of victims disclose that they've been abused, most
Yeah.
especially children.
What percentage go on to become abusers?
The vast majority do not, and because of the nature of sex offenders and kind of this diabolic, you really need to test their veracity by putting them on a polygraph, because
Interesting.
they lie, they cheat, they manipulate, they con, they they're the ultimate groomers, right? And so
Mhm.
um, any test, any research that's done has to have, and tough law enforcement guys who deal with these guys know you've got to have a polygraph to back up any kind of assertion. So
Mhm.
the interesting thing about this small study is that number one, we know that there are many victims that never come forward. We know also know that these solely child pornographer possessors are also, there is a chance that they have been abusing children. It's just they've gotten away with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
so it's a very sobering realization, because people like Judge Jackson, she was on the Sentencing Commission, and this is kind of her issue. Um,
yeah.
she she thinks that child pornography sentences are much too tough. She, like many, not many people, but they're just pictures. There's no real
Mhm.
um, harm done with the viewing of the pictures. Now you have the other side of, and she did acknowledge, hearing from victims over the years, that the victims say, I was re-victimized every time someone viewed those.
Yeah, yeah.
I never left the house because I was afraid I'd run into a man who had viewed my
Wo
child
Wow.
pornography.
I
Yeah,
I have a question about that too. Um, the fact that they say that it's just pictures, one of the things that they brought up in the hearing that was brought up was that because it's the internet, the sentencing recommendations and guidelines are outdated, because of the proliferation of images that is available to anybody on the internet. For example, if the guideline is, 10 images in your possession, these people are arguing that that actually be relaxed because of the just sheer volume of what's available on the internet. So they're literally saying because it's more readily available, it should be overlooked and allowed. Is that what that's what they're saying,
yeah.
right?
I mean, it was just the most bizarre argument I've ever heard. Troubling argument, because first of all, it is a epidemic of enormous proportions. Only the worst of the worst, shockingly, get arrested, and um, even then, my belief is that the worst of the worst can't be caught because of sophisticated computer spyware that they have on, and encryption keys. So it is, and by the way, most importantly, the biggest consumers of child pornography in the world are in the United States of America.
I was just going to ask you that. What's
Yeah,
the biggest market? Wow.
and and so it is. It's very lucrative, because people will pay these live webcams, these live websites. They'll pay for um, new fresh videos that aren't out there. There's a standard fare that's out there, but if you can promise them new, they'll pay for it. It's a grooming tool. Everybody talks about sex trafficking, oh how horrible it is, and but child pornography is
Yeah,
used as a tool.
I wanna stop for just a
Yeah.
second because I think we're gonna be censored here because
Oh,
this word, this is one of their taboo words right now, the G word. So I wanna come up
yeah,
with a code word so we don't get deleted. I know, they're all up in arms about this word that starts with a G. So let's just talk about, like, sowing the seed because that's what they're doing.
yeah,
I hate to do that, but I don't want the show to get taken down. This content
no,
is too important. So when we use the G word, starts with a G, ends with a G, ing, we're talking about sowing the seed, planting the seed in people so that they get used to this and it's normalized. All right. So when she says sowing the seed, that is that okay? Can we
yeah,
do it
that's
that way?
fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Welcome to censorship, folks.
Yeah.
And it also, raises the question of why they don't want you to hear this word, because it captures what's going on,
Mhm.
and in a general sense, and then in a specific sense. So they use it to teach children,
Mm.
use it to teach sex trafficking, victims. They use it to make a lot of money. To and so and it's oftentimes it is a gradual process that they begin by pornography, then move to child pornography. What I think is important in what we've kind of learned in modern day law enforcement, because people have, and even law enforcement had this misbelief that a pedophile would only be interested in girls ages 4 to 6. And the next pedophile may have a preference of 11 to 13-year-old boys, but they wouldn't, cross pollinate one. And they are now finding in, talking to these guys, doing research, putting them on polygraph, that more and more there's a cross pollination of, it's a crime of opportunity.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
and so for law enforcement people and for people, in families, well, oh well, Uncle Joe only likes girls, and so I don't have to worry about my boys. That's not what we're finding out in the research. They have their preference,
Yeah, yeah.
but so that's so back to Judge Jackson, her, and I think the Weeks case is a good example of where she apologized to the child porn defendant about who she was supposed to, sentence to 3 months, which
Mm.
everybody was a slap on the wrist. I would call it a pat on the head, because
Yeah,
clearly her
yeah.
comments to the family, back and forth, and hope you get back on your feet. Um, and her ambivalence about child pornography laws being tough. Um, and the interesting thing is she was vice chair of the UN Commission. And oftentimes what happens, Mary Grace, is, Congress will pass a law, oftentimes named after a child who's been victimized. The
Mhm.
Amber Alert, uh, the Jacob Wetterling law in the sentencing range,
Right. Yeah.
and take in what they call legislative history. People come and talk to
Mhm.
Congress, they tell about the
Okay.
impact. So, but the Sentencing Commission from time to time reviews laws. Are they too hard? Are they too soft? Are they, too lenient? Do they really reflect the importance of punishment and deterrence? And she felt very strongly that these laws involving child pornography were much too tough. And they brought in, the Sentencing Commission brought in to educate her about the reality of sex offenders and child pornographers and possessors, what really like. And I know some of the experts they brought in. These guys have been in the business for 30, 35 years,
Yeah.
researching, studying, interviewing therapists. They were global experts. And she said, "Well, I don't really think they're." And one of the experts said, "Well, I wouldn't, hold on to the, yes, they are pedophiles, and
Yeah.
yes, they are dangerous, and this is a crime that is a repeat offender of recidivism, as she saw in a couple of our cases already. Those were the ones that were caught." Um, so, I was personally very troubled, because I view these laws as, the first line of defense to protect children.
Yeah.
And I view judges as the last line of defense
Interesting.
to
Okay.
protect children. And in our country, the power of the federal government has been given this responsibility to protect child victims. In having worked with child victims, and one of the ways they heal from the trauma is to know that as their advocate, they have the federal government on their side.
Mhm.
And And so to have a judge who does not follow the recommendation of the prosecutor, does not follow the recommendation of the parole officer, who, by the way, does a deep dive in their history, and analyzes the nature of the cache that they have on their computer.
Yeah.
And she decided to ignore both the minimum and maximum sentencing guidelines and use discretion to give this extraordinarily lenient sentence that, of course, blew up in her face. And more victims in the Weeks case, and in the Weeks and the Hawking case, they both reoffended. So, this, to obviously, as a child advocate,
Yeah. Yeah.
there is nothing more important than the future of our country. Before the internet, we had our hands full with child abuse victims and the crime of child abuse. Now it's all bets are off. This is the wild, wild west with the internet, and serious. This is an epidemic. And frankly, I mean, I'm not a computer expert, but I can't believe, with a house savvy, with the AI and everything else, that we can't get these photos off the internet and to protect children. Most child abuse images now have a kind of a hashtag on it, an identifier.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
so why they can't pull this up, I don't know. But I would think that that would be certainly something that the parents of the world should demand, because these children, once they are abused, now we know from MRIs on their brain that there is a marker on their brain, a trauma
Wow.
marker that of that moment when the abuse began, no matter what age they are. And
Ho
so
I
this
I want you to say that again. This is really important.
that they have now studied,
Yeah.
because they realize that the children carry in their body and in their brain the trauma, the initial ongoing trauma that occurred to them. So just because the trauma stops does not mean that the impact, the physical marker that they now see in their brain, which literally lights up, and impacts their thought processes, um,
Mhm.
their connectors of the neurons. This They carry this with them because of the abuse. So more medical testing is going to continue to go on. So to learn what is the impact of the physical abuse trauma on a child, and how it impacts their decision making and their ability to thrive. It was G.K. Chesterton that said that innocence of a child is the foundation of wisdom.
Mhm.
To allow children to grow free of adult worries, free of polluted thoughts of sex, to allow a child to play innocently, to explore with their imagination
Mhm.
the happy things of nature, and with their
Wow.
friendships.
Yeah.
We are a nation that is hurtling down, robbing children of their innocence. This is a war on the
Wow. We're losing the feed here. You're freezing
childhood,
up.
and
It
yet
surprised me.
it's the very
You're you're
okay.
freezing.
It's not
Okay.
surprising. Can you hear me?
Interesting. Yeah, I wanna say something about this too, just before
Oh,
you go on. Eh, when we use different words in the chat here, I just wanna be very clear. I'm not afraid. Liz is not afraid. We are doing everything we can to get the message out, and if it means that we, change some of the wording in our message so that we don't get the channel taken down, that's what we're doing. It is not a fear issue. I'm not self-censoring. I am trying to get around the algorithms. So I just want to be clear about that. And the same thing with Liz. This is too important
Yeah.
to allow them to take us down midstream. So I want to be extremely clear about that. And those of you who pray, I want you now just to really send out the heavenly host over this broadcast, because there's obvious interference in the heavenlies right now. Liz is freezing up. We've already had tech issues. So this is a message that has to get out. And we're going to do it whatever way we can. We're not going to stop talking and telling the truth. I just want to be very clear about that. So please pray, those of you who are listening, and just cover this broadcast in prayer so that we can get the message out. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Liz. I just feel like we need to kind of get that going so that we can get the
No, no.
rest of this. The this nominee for the Supreme Court, I want you to talk about the implications, the long-term implications of having a
Oh,
54-year-old woman with this background sitting on the highest court in the land. What does that do? I mean, she's already on the appellate court, which is scary and frightening in itself. But what is it? What's the long-term implication here? What happens?
well, one of the things that I've learned is looking around the corner over the hill, and watching what's going on in the culture, the issue that I care deeply about. This is what I think the radical left is up to. I think it is clear that this is a move to normalize pedophilia. This is a move to the age of consent. When a child, human, adult to sex. Most states it's 18. It is, in my mind, um, an effort, and I think it's moving at rapid speed to criminalize child pornography, for the very reason that she said.
Okay, we're just going to wait for.
So let's just decriminalize. And um, so that's what's going on. But what has happened is that this nomination has awoken a sleeping giant of parents. I have heard from parents around the country. They have, between Disney, and they have spent, 2 years fighting this battle in the school boards. They're no longer naive. They understand politics. They're understanding the radical left, the agenda to destroy the family, to drive a wedge between parent and child, to sexualize children beginning in kindergarten. I mean, this is game on. And I think this really is, no matter what happens as they're voting right now, no matter
Mhm.
what happens, the American people now realize they must be engaged, because what has happened is that they are going to, we have, in my opinion, a sympathizer, an enabler of child pornographers who is going to be on the Supreme Court for 35 years. The American parents are no longer going to tolerate the sexualization of their children, nor are they going to allow that sexualization be encoded in the law. And Mary Grace, I'll tell you what's happening right now. The radical left, in the dark money that was behind this nomination, they are already cherry picking cases that are in the lower courts, child pornography cases, that they are going to put in the pipeline to the Supreme Court, knowing that one, two, or a number of them at some point in the next few years are going to reach the Supreme Court, and she's going to be sitting there, it appears. Our work is cut out for us. And I think, it's really game on with the American public. They're fully engaged.
Is there
And
anything today, any action that our listeners can take today to try to stop this?
well, they can still certainly call their both their senators, whether they're Republican or Democrat, 202 It's not too late.
202, read that again.
Sure. 202-224-3121. That's the switchboard at the United States Senate, and express their grave concern over this nominee. And then what I'm personally going to be doing after this nomination, whether it passes or doesn't, I'm going to be really taking a very serious campaign to the American public, to the families, to ensure that any senator that voted for this judge, whether they're up for election in 2022 or 2024, that this is the main issue. This is a voting for her, in my opinion, is a toxic vote. It is a vote that is going to hurt children, and we're not going to forget it. And I've heard from a lot of millennial parents who have said over the years, they're not savvy politically. They're not, they're not. They may vote Democratic. They're not interested in their, governor politics. They're
Yeah.
very lazy. Not anymore. It is.
So people are waking up. This is waking people up.
Yes.
Okay.
And the last 2 years in the school boards has given them a very quick, hard, tough civics lesson, hasn't it?
Yeah.
They've learned who their
Yeah.
senators are and their governors. So
Yeah, I wanna say I wanna reiterate this. This is important, guys, because, in the church, in the communities, people who have long said, "Oh, I'm just not political." What you're looking at right now is the cost of burying your head in the sand and saying,
yeah,
"I'm not political," and the cost of staying in a congregation, with a pastor or with a priest who refuses to talk about these issues from the pulpit. This is the result of what we get for saying, "I'm just not political." You become political by default when they come after your kids.
yeah,
And let's not let this happen again. Let's not get in a place where we are backed against a wall because of what they want to do to our kids, not just now, but for generations. This will affect generations. That's important to understand here. So it's just it's astonishing, what we're seeing right now. I hope that you don't have to go on a crusade. In any case, there are 3 senators on the Republican side right now who
mhm.
have actually voted to go forward with this nomination. Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, who I would, argue isn't actually a Republican. Who's the 3rd one?
um, Lisa Murkowski
Lisa
from
Murkowski,
Alaska.
of course, yeah. So it really makes you wonder, what is behind this? Who's
Yeah,
pushing them to do this? Who is pushing them to do this? 3 Republicans. These people, this has to be a life-changing decision for anybody that votes in favor of this nominee, Republican or Democrat. It has to be an issue at the ballot box. It cannot, whether she gets, confirmed or not, even just voting to go ahead should be a career-ending vote. That is my take on it. What say you about that?
I agree. I'm in child as nothing more matters to our country.
Yeah,
This is our future. We have a highly traumatized future of people that can't reach their potential because they were victimized as children. We're not going to continue to thrive to be the greatest country on earth. And this was the child. We've got to step into the reach. This is a hill we have to die on. When you see how aggressive, I mean, they're so aggressive, and even Disney now, you the family company, right? Ultimate family company.
yeah, I was gonna ask you
It,
about that. Yeah, definitely.
uh, you've got to vote with your feet. You've got to protest. You've got to call. Look, I've worked in politics. I've worked in NGOs. They don't want you to know this one thing. They don't want you to know that your call, your your phone call to the CEO, to the advertisers at Disney, to your politicians, that it matters. It matters hugely, huge, and people have just got to use their voice, and they have to look for alternative ways of finding the information. Mary Grace, your media is one way. And two, once you find it, share it, and know that every single person in the United States has a role to play. Everybody does. And I don't care if you are, you know, 85 years old. You have a role to play to protect children. I want to tell you a funny story. If you're in a prayer group, share this information with your prayer group. Start talking about, what can we do to stop Disney? How can we make an impact? The imagination of the American people, and moms waiting in line to pick up their kids. All bets are off. They can do it all.
Yeah.
I have a friend who part of my prayer group, and she was out in California at a very fancy dinner. And who's at the dinner but Jeff Bezos? And she goes up to, of Amazon, of Washington Post, and she goes up to Jeff Bezos with her rosary and says, "Jeff, I've been praying for you. I want you to convert. I want you to bring goodness to this country." Some of these are my words, but you get she just walked boldly. I mean, so there's opportunities where God puts people in your path, right?
Yeah.
And Jeff, to his credit, was just in many respects charmed. He goes, "I'm praying for George Soros. I'm praying for Bill Gates. I'm praying for Klaus Schwab." And she goes through this whole list of globalists that she's very concerned about, and she gives up her favorite rosary, hands it to Jeff, who is very appreciative, and says, "I'm going to keep on praying for you, Jeff. I'm happy to meet you." So while you may not meet Jeff Bezos at a party,
Yeah.
you never know how you can impact. And asking God to just say, put somebody in my path, put an opportunity in my
Yeah.
path,
Yeah.
help me to see and hear about this issue.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? And before you know it, I mean, as we all know, all of a sudden you go, I know where that is. There's an answer to my prayer.
Yeah.
So I just want people to know that you will be marginalized by the media, silenced by the media. You keep on talking. The voice of a parent or a grandparent or a loving aunt, mother, sister, cannot be drowned out. And we're not going to allow it to be. And I have seen miracles, as Mary Grace, with one person who has the courage and the patriotism to step out into what is really dangerous territory. But nevertheless, I'm thinking of Jack Maxey, who
Yeah.
took the Hunter Biden laptop, which was in his possession, and did not have any fear,
Yeah.
did not, say, "Oh, there's nothing I can do. Everybody's seeing it. Nobody will do anything." He kept pressing forward.
Yeah. For over a year now, almost 18
Yes.
months. Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
everybody's talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. We made that happen.
You
It's
did. You
I
did make that happen.
Yeah, it's very encouraging. I just got a clip from Australian TV today that was talking about it. We're kind of losing you off screen. If you could move a little bit more. There you go. That's
Okay, good.
better. We don't want to lose you. Um, so that's great. So I want to go back to this issue with Disney as well, because Christopher Rufo broke a story last week about some internal meetings with heads of Disney, content creators, executives at Disney, who were saying that they wanted to that they had actual goals of putting a certain percentage of queer, trans, all of this indoctrination into Disney content for children. Have you are you in touch with Christopher? Have you guys it would be so good to have a show with the three of you together
No,
about
no,
this.
but I'm a big fan of his. He's
Yeah,
brilliant. He's brilliant. He does great research.
yeah,
Yeah, this is about the indoctrination of our children, people
yeah.
who have no idea who your children are,
Now he
but
yeah,
obviously have a very strong radical leftist agenda, which you makes you wonder why do they have this agenda?
yeah,
Um, and instead of just creating beautiful, creative, imaginative, lovely content
right,
that
right.
can be enjoyed by children, they're now imposing a radical sexual prurient um,
Yeah, yeah,
agenda into the media. And a country, a country that's lost God is a country that can't create anymore. We all know, we've all talked about it, right? There's no great movies coming out. There's no great content, creative content. They stopped creating stories, right? Because the imagination has always been linked to the great creator.
yeah, yeah,
And when the great creator, his love for the earth, for mankind, is never ending. It is eternal, as is the ability to connect to the great content of the creator. And so it's gone because they've turned away from God. This country's turned away from God. And so as a result, we know the society, the culture, the civilization has become harsh, crass, hardened, sexualized. Um, and so that's what's happening in Disney, in my opinion. But they do so at their great peril, don't they?
yeah, yeah.
And parents are having none of it. And why they didn't stop to think of who is our customer here, right? Who's our
Wow.
families? And families have tremendous power when it comes to movies produced, to the theme parks produced by Disney.
Mm,
So
yeah,
that'd be a great place to start. I think they can have a huge impact. I think letter writing, calling their advertisers, educating yourself about Disney. There's a great book about Disney that was written a number of years ago by Peter Schweitzer, who's written all the great books on the Clinton family and the political
so good.
corruption, Red Handed. Um, Peter Schweitzer dug into this very issue of Disney. He and his
I
wife.
did not
Yeah.
realize that. Wow, I'm gonna put his name up in the chat here, Peter Schweitzer. Do you remember the name of that book?
I think I have it right here. Hold on. It is Disney the Mouse Betrayed. Here it is. Can you see?
Yeah,
Yeah, the Mouse Betrayed. And so anyway, I mean, those are, if you're so moved as parents, I mean, obviously you have all the control of your children, whether you're going to take them to a new Disney movie. I mean, it's time. This is guerrilla warfare is all I can think of.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah.
fighting for the bodies and souls of our children.
Yeah, and I wanna really explore this a little bit because, you talked about how America's lost God. I mean, I think America a lot of Americans at the government level, I don't know if we lost God as much as we just rejected God. A lot of people that I know as individuals have not done that, but we have pushed him out of schools. Christians have failed to be influencers in the mountains of influence in government. All those people who say I'm not political, that's a big mistake because you leave a big vacuum for the Marxist indoctrination in the church, in the
Mhm.
arts, in entertainment, in all of these areas, when Christians fail, not only fail to show up, but just give it over
Right.
to this radical agenda, what do you expect to happen? Now, one of the things that I'm actually encouraged by is many people have been in prayer and repentance for our nation
Mhm.
and have been asking that have been asking that the evil be revealed.
Yeah.
And what we are seeing right now, this is kind of crazy because we're seeing a level of evil coming out. I mean, it's like they're not trying to hide it. In the past, it was hidden, it was subliminal, it was, kind of behind closed doors. Now it's just in your face. And in my opinion, I feel like the war in the heavenlies is getting heated up so bad, and so hot, that the demonic is actually just throwing everything they have at it because I think they're actually losing, uh, right? Because people are learning how to battle, with their authority as Christians like never before. Parents are learning how to go to battle, in actually in the school boards, in the boards of supervisors. They're showing up like they've never done before. And sadly, if we hadn't been through what we've been through the last 2 years, I think we would still be asleep, and this agenda would be passed without anybody ever even knowing that it took place. Are you seeing that as well?
I agree 100%.
Okay. Yeah.
As chilling and jarring as all this is, I think God's shining the light on all the evil. And it's almost like with COVID, they turned the light switch on and said, here it is. Here it is. We're
Yeah.
not going to pretend anymore. We're not going to be subtle anymore.
Mhm.
And, we're all like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Everywhere we look, Disney, the schools, where had they been all these years, right? Why didn't we see it? And so it is a grace. It is a grace.
Mhm.
But with this grace and with the realization, it causes us we have to take a stance. And, G.K. Chesterton
Yeah.
said, once you abolish God, the government becomes God. And I think that's what the globalists are. If you listen to Klaus Schwab, these messianic, elites, global elites, they think they're God. I mean, even George Soros said, I have fashioned myself a God. I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
cannot believe they're saying these words, but
It goes right back to, the fall of Lucifer, and a third of the angels out of heaven literally wanted to be God. And
yes,
and so there is nothing new under the sun. He was cast down to earth, and that's where he roams to this day. So it's not surprising that people who give themselves over to that influence are then speaking those lies, and embracing that belief and that mindset. Can you hold the book up one more time so
sure,
people can
sure.
screenshot it? The Disney book. Yeah, so move it over a little bit more, a little bit to the other side. There you go, that's perfect. Okay, Peter Schweitzer is the author of that book. I get his books on Audible. They're really good listening. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
Now
I mean, he's great, and I'm sure there's others that are out there, but
sure,
he's the best researcher I know out
yeah,
there. And yes, we're in enemy occupied territory, as C.S. Lewis said. We've here we are. We're in enemy occupied territory. They've taken away our ability to talk. They're censoring us. Um, but I mean, I studied a lot about the resistance in World War II. Where every little tiny village in France and Germany and Belgium and all throughout Europe were occupied by German soldiers, brutal German soldiers. And the resistance started off small. It was, when German soldiers would ask, which way to the, Champs-Elysees, and they'd give them the wrong directions. Those
yeah,
little. And then it started with the baker who would bake a loaf of bread and put, the movements of the German army, a map, into the loaf of bread. And a 16-year-old biker would bike it across, 20 miles and deliver it. It was the priests, it was the nuns, it was all the people who hid Allied soldiers. And the little acts of resistance that grew and grew and grew. And by the time World War II ended, many thousands and thousands of people were part of the resistance. And even Eisenhower said that World War II would have continued long for many more years had it not been for the resistance. And that was children, young people, old people, everybody saying, I'm going to do something. I'm going to take, take a stand to help with the war effort. And in
Yeah.
fact, it was interesting. Even when they were training the Allied pilots in England before they'd go over to Europe, they would tell the pilots, if you get shot down and you're lucky enough to parachute, go to the nearest village, and in that go to the church, because all the priests in that village church are part of the underground network. I mean, we may go back to that at some point. And they will bring you to the resistance network that will bring you back to England. So it was part of their training to
Yeah.
look for the churches to save them. But when you read about the resistance, you'll see time after time after time, people with particular skills, but through prayer, through magic, they figured out a way to help the Allied effort. And I think that's really the mindset that we have to get into. That I do have a role
Mhm.
to play, and these are dark times, but at least we know, right? I mean, I always say,
Yeah.
who turned on the light switch and when did it happen? All of a sudden, everybody's saying, doesn't it seem like everything's crazy? But but this process of radicalization, of communists infiltrating our government, our schools, our churches, it has been going on for 100 years. Certainly, there's been a concerted effort. It's been in the dark. It's been really where we haven't concealed, so that we haven't been able to know about it. And now the word's out. It's time to have the great reset, and so they can't stay in the dark corners and continuing to plot. They've got to come out. So it's a battle. We know it's a battle. um, and really the greatest challenge facing all of us is the challenge of distinguishing really reality from fantasy, and propaganda from truth. And we know who is truth. It's Christ himself. I am the way, the life, and the truth.
Yeah.
And so that is really what we need to cling to in these times. And
Amen. Yeah.
and I think, all of us who've been censored, who search for the truth in all this COVID craziness and chaos. What is the truth? Um, we seek it. We're grateful when we find it, and our instincts, we can tell this is honest, this is
Yeah.
truthful.
Yeah.
This doctor I can believe. Dr. Zelenko, Dr. Malone, all those great doctors, Dr. Corey, Dr. McCullough. You look at your instincts tell you there is a man who's brave, and he is telling me the truth. But it's been a real journey for all of us
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
find that truth in the COVID. There's going to be battle after battle that they'll present to all of us. And our job is to really cut through all the propaganda and nonsense and say, what's at stake here? What really matters? And what is the truth? So, I mean, uh, it's going to be quite a battle going forward. But there are more of us than there are of them.
Yes.
We cannot be intimidated. I mean, I look at Jack Maxey, and I look at the John Paul Mac Isaacs, who initially was given the Hunter Biden laptop, a man that's legally blind, simple man that has his own small business, but because he was a patriot, because he came from a family of patriots, he knew that he had to do something with this.
Yeah.
Um, and therein lies the last 20 years of what's been going on in government and in the Democratic Party and with the globalists.
Yeah, I wanna touch on a couple things that you just said. This is interesting because first of all, you just said there are more of us than there are of them. And this is something that I really wanna stress is that The number of votes in the last election,
Mhm.
it's obvious that it was the other way around. We know that. And that means that more than 80 million really supported President Trump. So because the media is a captured operation, because it is the propaganda arm of the party, of the regime, it's common to feel that you're not the majority, that
Yeah.
you are the minority, because they are pushing that narrative. And it's critical that people understand we are the majority. This is why they wanted to lock everybody down during COVID and keep people from congregating. This is why they're arresting people and literally shutting down school board meetings and boards of supervisors, city council meetings, because they're overwhelmed by the people coming out against them, the majority. Um, and so people, I don't want you to forget that. Now, I want to go back to something you said about getting wisdom from God, because this is
Uh-huh.
really important when it comes to taking action, when it comes to doing these little acts of resistance, like you described. So many times, uh, when people don't understand, it's God who gives you wisdom and revelation. God will reveal to you strategies to use if you just get quiet and pray and ask Him. He will prompt you. Holy Spirit will prompt you. Pick up the phone, call this person, go do this thing, go, even sometimes just go out and do an errand. There may be somebody that you're supposed to talk to that day, that you're going to plant a seed and tell them about something that's going on. It's not always the big things. Sometimes it's just the importance of just showing up and being ready to walk in the footsteps of where God is leading you. And I have a story about that from the resistance in World War II. I want to share with our listeners. When you were talking about that, it reminded me that the boat captains, the Danish boat captains, and the Swedes were working on getting Jews out and away from the German occupation. And one of the things that would happen is that the German soldiers would come aboard the boats looking for stowaways, looking for the Jews they were hiding. And I don't know how they figured it out, but the boat captains somehow figured out that if they laced their handkerchiefs with cocaine,
Oh, yeah.
that it would throw off the scent of the dogs. Do you know this story?
Right.
Um,
Yes,
and
I
so
know the
these
story.
yeah,
Yeah.
the dogs would come on the boats to sniff out people, and a boat captain, would take his handkerchief out, pretend to blow his nose or something, and drop it, or pet the dog, or whatever he did, to throw off the scent of these dogs. Now, you tell me, how did somebody come up with that idea? I believe that was divinely inspired. These kinds of strategies that God gives us are strategies that we can't always think of with our human brains, but we have the mind of Christ. And we want to take it, we want to tap into that as believers and adopt strategies that we would not normally have thought of. It looks like our guest is freezing here. I hope Liz is still with us. It's crazy the interference we're getting here. Are you still there? If she's not, we'll click her out and get her back in. Um, are you there? Okay. Okay, good. There you are. That's so strange. Okay. So I wanted to go to the next question here, and that is, you talked about Jack Maxey. Have you spoken to him about what is on the laptop, what he has actually seen in terms of the victimization of these children? Have you talked to him about that?
We have talked somewhat of it, yes. To Jack's credit, and I would caution everybody else, to Jack's credit, viewing child pornography, unless you're law enforcement, or have the ability to have some authority to do it, is a crime. And also, I might add, Jack and I've talked about protecting our eyes, right? Um, this stuff. Most men would never want to.
Okay. You're freezing up, and I want you to say that again. Ok yeah, this is it's so
He's
important. You're freezing
seeing
up. Let's you
what?
say that again.
Oh gosh, can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah, you froze up as soon as you started talking about Jack. So I wanna say something. Somebody in the chat is telling me something, and it may or may not be true. They're saying that when people put emojis in the chat, that it actually, triggers bots, and that may be true. Let's just try it, guys. Let's try leaving out the emojis and see if that helps. I'm not trying to censor you, but obviously something is going on with our feed here. Uh, they're triggered, and so let's do the best we can to keep this going without, making it harder to keep it going. So let's try that again. You were saying something very important about Jack Maxey and the access that he has to the laptop, the legality, these types of things. Please, let's try to get this out again. Okay, I think, Liz, I'm gonna get you to click out and come back on the show. Um, if you can do that, that would be great. I'm gonna click you out. Huh. Um, you're totally frozen. Just ridiculous. Somebody in Facebook is telling me that there's a troll that won't stop. I can't see the troll. If somebody can reply to the troll, I will remove it. We're going to try to get Liz back in here. Clearly, the topic that we're discussing today is absolutely, yeah. Um, yeah, somebody is saying don't use emojis. Okay, in Facebook, somebody says that there's a troll that won't stop. I can't see the troll. If somebody can reply to it and say troll, yeah, this is a really serious topic here that we're talking about. Hey, Christy, you're fine. Um, okay, let's see. You just responded to the troll, the angry emoji. Why am I not seeing it? Okay, we're waiting for our guest, Liz Yore, to come back. For some reason, guys, I'm not seeing it here in the chat. Let me see if I can get on just on Facebook outside of Restream and see this troll. Thanks, Christy. I appreciate it. Valerie Binden is the troll. Okay. All right, I'll find her. Yeah, while we're waiting for Liz to come back. Okay. Um, okay, I'm going to jump on Facebook here and see if I can get this troll. Valerie Binden. Facebook is kind of a train wreck, you guys, so it's not always easy to find people and block them. So here we go. Let's see if we can get Liz back on here. Okay, Liz, it looks like we have you back. You're a little bit off to the side.
Sorry.
So yeah, let's just keep going. Obviously, we're going to keep fighting the fight. They should know by now that they can't stop us. So we're talking about Jack. You were saying I was
Well,
asking you.
what
Yeah.
I was saying is, yeah, Jack's very concerned about inappropriate pictures of underage girls on there. He is not. That's why he's reached out to law enforcement to have them examine them. I think he's in the process. It's known now he's in Switzerland to have law enforcement look at these pictures, and he's being very cautious. My advice is to all of us have to protect our eyes, right? Because looking at any kind of sexualized material is very damaging, and especially with child pornography, it's traumatizing. And so he's taking the necessary steps to have it examined by law enforcement. Now, this is the point. The FBI has had this computer since December of 2019. As a child advocate, I'm very concerned that they did not move at lightning speed to protect any potential child victims
Yeah.
or sex trafficking victims that were on that computer. To this day, they say they don't know where it is. I think Jack has even said they haven't even opened an investigation or
Yeah,
examined it.
that we know of, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like the three monkeys: see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Um, but that to me, I mean, put aside, if you can, for a minute, the national security issues that are very grave, but also the imminent danger that children could be involved in, and that they aren't moving, lickety split to identify the kids and find out if they're okay and what happened to them and get them therapy and counseling.
Yeah,
Apparently that wasn't done. And
yeah.
and that's, I think people need to realize, and this is how they can help. In my experience, the last 30 years of missing kids, abducted kids, child exploitation, federal law enforcement, this was at the bottom of the ladder. You know, if they wanted to be promoted in the FBI and to get, terrorism, bank robbery, those were the kinds of cases that they wanted to be involved in. Child cases, no, I mean that was a career killer. And it's,
Wait, what? Wait, say that again?
yeah, I mean, working on child cases, it was not a career promoter by any stretch, and I would, and this is my kind of personal advice to people who have any kind of battles with a government agency or an institution. When I was investigating missing kids, now in my mind, I tried to look at each case as, if this were my child, what would I want law enforcement to do? What would I expect to be done? And so these cases that I was working on, I wanted to move heaven and earth as if it were my child, right? I mean, it's just, everybody would be that way. Every parent would be that way. And so I would call the FBI. FBI had jurisdiction in all these cases. They have kidnapping, abduction, child exploitation. Oh, just call the locals. We don't. I'd have to educate them on what the cases were, and what the laws were. And time again, I would be shut down. And these are kids, long time missing kid cases. But what I found was, and this is my advice to people on the video. My advice is, the institutions are flawed. I mean, certainly we now know the
Mm,
FBI is corrupt, sadly corrupt, and incompetent, and just not representing the American
yeah,
people. The institutions are flawed, but my job is to find that one person that will help me, that will
mm,
care, that will go the extra mile. Making a lot of phone calls, knocking on a lot of doors, never give. What's that story in the Bible of the widow constantly, pestering, please, the judge, please, and finally
yeah,
judge rose up.
yeah,
Um, that's, and especially now, because so entrenched in federal institutions, government agents, there are good people. And my experience was, because when you're working on, the law enforcement person on the other end, working every day, and you're strategizing. My experience was is that every time I found an individual who cared, who would go to a Christian, a church going Christian,
mhm.
and we'd laugh, at the end of the case when, uh,
Okay, I think there
and
might be
how that really, because
something with your internet, and so one of the things I'm noticing, let's try something, is that, uh, if you're talking with your hands, which I do a lot. If you try not
Okay.
moving as much, it may I notice sometimes, like, when you're moving your hands, which is really
Okay.
hard.
Good. Okay.
Let's see if we can do that.
Um, so, so anyway, so at the end of a case, we'd laugh about, it was God who was in charge, the guardian angels who were in charge. And so, um, you
Yeah,
know, in difficult situations, trying to find kids who were don't want to be found or being hidden by bad guys or being
yeah,
exploited, um, you really needed help from heaven. Um,
you
and
do. Yeah,
and and so anybody out there, and I'm sure there are people out there kind of battling the system, whether it's for kids or not, or for issues, don't give up.
mm,
Just keep on hammering away. There's somebody out there that's going to be able to help you. Or if you're in on the other side of it, be there for the public. Um, our children, these cases, every child is a child of God. We have to. We're going to be, I think at the end of our life, what did we what did we do to help and protect children? Did we make this world a better place for children? Those are the things that we're going to be judged on, and so this is all about you know I was placed in positions where I learned these things, and I would just say to people who say, well, what can I do? I mean, you can't imagine the wonderful, wild, exciting ride that God has in store for you if you just really let go and let God, and really just make a mental and emotional commitment to whatever the thing that you're passionate about, with respect to our country, our church, our society, our civilization. I mean, I sat back, Mary Grace, in amazement at the moms and dads at the school boards. I was,
yeah,
however depressing those times were, and they were depressing, I was like, whoa, there is a movement afoot that nobody was planning to see or hear.
yeah.
And we're not going back, right? We're not
Yeah,
going to go back.
yeah, yeah. I this is really interesting what you were saying about how you encountered Christians in law enforcement. This is another point of prayer that I wanted to give people because, when you're out there doing the work of God, uh, pray that God would highlight those people, that the angels would actually clear the way and put you at the window of the person that is a follower of Christ, that is an advocate for children or whatever issue it is that you are advocating for. This is important. God connects us. And a lot of times we don't actually make those connections because we don't walk in our authority. We don't understand. We don't know that we can ask for that and even expect it. And this is what Liz is talking about from her own experience, that she is willing to be obedient and to follow the call of God into these areas that seem impossible. But what he does is that he connects her with people who are following him, who are listening to his voice. This is a key issue. This is a key point here. We can't do it on our own power. We just don't have the resources. It's a losing battle in the natural, but not with God, not when you have the angels guiding you, not when you have Holy Spirit nudging you and saying, "Hey, go this way, check here." Yeah,
I've got a great story. When I was at DCFS, I was general counsel, and we opened the first missing children's unit, kids who are in foster care who run away. It's very common, especially with teens. And they were, in my mind, kind of crudely call them runners. I'd be like, runners? Now, these are children that are missing, and we're their guardian, right? And so we had two 12-year-old girls. I'm going to keep my hands to my. We had two 12-year-old girls, and they went missing to my horror. I mean, can you imagine in the big city of Chicago?
yeah,
And we located them. and realized they were involved in sex trafficking. And to my horror, they were also being flown all over the country. Their traffickers would make approximately $250,000 a year on each child. And I didn't recognize when they found the girls. I didn't recognize them from their pictures because they were kind of chubby little 12-year-olds. And 6 or 7 weeks later, they were unrecognizable, very thin. And one of the social workers said, "You've lost a lot of weight." And they said, "Well, if you walked the streets at night in Chicago for 8 hours a night, you'd lose weight too," which was, ugh.
Wow.
Um, but these girls, 12-year-old girls, would we'd bring them to the what they call the shelter, the DCFS shelter. They would get 3 squares in a shower, and then their trafficker would show up, pick them up, and they take off again. And at the time, I was involved in a project, initial project with the FBI to work these cases, and I had fortunately found a wonderful two FBI agents that were great. And so at 3 in the morning, we would call the agents and say, "The girls are at the shelter," and they drive cross country, across the city to the shelter at 3 in the morning to try and talk the girls into staying
Yeah.
and into turning in their traffickers. And at one point, they kept on running. It was so frustrating. And I was just so worried they were going to end up dead. And I knew these guys were terrifying them. They were so fearful they were going to be killed. And at one point, the FBI agent said to the girls when they were at the shelter, and this was the third time, he said, "I've been praying for you." And he said, before you leave, would you pray with me? And so these girls, little girls, who had been just, you can imagine, in the streets of Chicago.
Yeah.
Um, um, and that was the moment where she told me that an FBI agent would care enough to say to her, "I'm praying for you, and will you pray for me?" At that moment, she not only decided to stop running, we put her in hiding. They had a grand jury against these traffickers, opened a federal grand jury.
Wow.
And because they had money, they had private attorneys. And these little girls were testified before the grand jury in Chicago, the federal grand jury. And these are grand juries that are more interested in listening to, or used to listening to political corruption or bank robberies. And they listened to what these girls went through. And wasn't a dry eye; they were sobbing. And so they had to also testify at a federal trial. Can you imagine a federal trial against guys that they were terrified of? These guys were convicted and sent away for many, many years.
Wow.
And these girls now train other children in therapists, who deal with missing and trafficked victims. And so that moment in time where, out of desperation, I'm sure, he said, "Look, I've been praying for you. Will you pray for me?" Like,
Yeah.
stop running. And
Yeah.
that had a huge impact on, obviously it had, and her life was turned around.
That is such a beautiful picture of just the love of God for each one of his
Yeah.
children, because, this is the story of every redemption story, is that, God goes, he doesn't, he will leave the 99 for the one.
Yes.
And that's what Jesus tells us, that each one is precious to him. And for this man or this agent to say, "I've been praying for you, pray with me." It was that one moment and that one human touch, the touch from God, really, that melted that child and
Yes.
broke through the victimization, the abuse, the horror that they had been experiencing. And this is what I don't want you guys to leave here um, today without getting this, is that one moment where this person was brave enough to do what was politically incorrect,
Oh, I'm sure.
to
I'm sure.
save this child, I'm praying for you, pray with me. That was it. That turned the entire case around and put these people behind bars. Understand the importance of just going with the unction of the Holy Spirit and following that nudge and doing the thing that may get you in trouble, that may not be popular. Because, we're not serving man here. We don't fear man. We're
No.
taking a risk, right?
Right. And I'm sure, I would never say his name because, it was probably against all FBI policy. Talking about prayer, to,
Yeah.
to a potential victim. But it, you're not going to be successful fighting the devil if you in evil, if we can finally talk about evil in our society, and
Yeah.
this is evil, unless you're armed with the Holy Spirit, with the angels, with your prayer warriors behind your work.
Mhm.
You can't fight evil, you cannot defeat evil, unless you really come armed with the real weapons that matter. And I've seen that time and time again, working with some of the most hardened victims and the toughest prosecutors and cops, is that when there's success, it's always the success of God, always. And we're just mere instruments. And He is going to put us in, an opportunity, and it's up to us to decide whether or not we're going to really take that chance and fight the good fight. And our job is to plant the seed. It's also to work the soil and create little miracles in our life. Jack Maxey's a miracle. John Paul Mac Isaacs is a miracle.
Yeah.
This show, which brings people to an audience, is a miracle. Look at your talents and say, what is it, God, you want me to do? You have put me on this earth. There's a saying that we're brought to this earth with orders from God, and our job is to open up that envelope, read our orders, and then carry them out. Some people don't open that envelope ever in their life. Some people open it and then don't follow those orders. So
Wow. Yeah.
it's
Very
it's
powerful.
clearly it's just clearly a spiritual and a mental commitment. And and I see it so right now with so many things just attacking our wonderful country. I mean, I've traveled around the world, and God has so blessed our country.
Yeah.
And we have really squandered the gifts, on all sorts of levels. But we can restore God in the proper role of authority as the king of our nation, and really begin to kind of sort out what needs to be sorted out, and to restore faith and honor and virtue, like innocence, like the beauty of innocence and purity and modesty and bravery and patriotism. I mean, all those things that we never hear about anymore.
I love where this conversation is going.
We
It's
didn't plan it, did we?
no, no, God is directing the conversation,
That's
and
right.
that's why I like to have these long conversations. It just, there's so much that is good about what we are doing and what we're witnessing. It's really, really hard. Um, it's incredibly hard, but we know that God wins.
Yeah.
And that is what we can never ever forget. And sometimes I think about the forerunners in our faith. I think about Paul. I think about Peter. I think about the apostles. Really, who I mean, Paul was imprisoned so many times, and he considered it a privilege and an honor to be in chains for the gospel. And in our society right now, some of us don't even want to hear about bad things.
Right.
We
Right.
don't want to tackle the hard things. We want to just tune out and get on social media or watch a show, and we can't do that. Everybody here is called to take action. But I wanted to ask you when for you, uh, obviously prayer is a really pivotal part of your life. Uh, meditation, you're immersed in the world of evil. How do you balance what is it that you do to fill your cup? Um, can you give us an example? Like, do you read
Yeah.
a devotional?
Um,
Let's get personal here for a minute. How do you cope with this and
well,
keep going to the
I'm a practicing Catholic. I go to mass every day. Um, I say the rosary, um, and I have a prayer group. I have immersed myself in the faith in ways that I never did growing up. I'm a cradle Catholic, and so um, and it was really, quite frankly, challenged tremendously when I investigated clergy sex abuse in the Catholic Church, and I truly peered into the pit of hell and talked to, you know, dozens and dozens of men who were victims of clergy sex abuse. And this is how nearly every one of their stories, and it still gets to me. They would say, Liz, when I was in seventh grade, I was head of the captain of the basketball team. I was one of the crossing guards. I was got straight A's. I was the most popular kid in my class. I was going to go to the best high school. I was so smart. I had so many friends. I was happy. And then I got abused. And by eighth grade, by priest,
wow.
and by eighth grade, I dropped out of school, started drugs. Um, there were various stories. Dropped out of school, got into gangs, violence, jail, mental illness, homosexuality. I mean, just a nightmare. The potential just shriveling up and vaporizing,
Wow.
man after man after man. And I'm listening to these stories,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, how could this have happened? But it's to your initial talk is like, oh no, the light must be shine on the darkness.
Yeah.
And so I had my, crisis of faith
Mhm.
where I really went to church and said, I've had it, I've seen too much suffering, all this lost potential, all these great men who suffered so much.
Yeah.
How could we have let this happen? How
Mhm.
could you have done this, God? And my answer was not, I was like, goodbye. I was ready to walk away. And the answer I got, and I mean, this is quite personal. The answer I got is, there were, a decade or two, Liz, where you weren't an attentive and practicing Catholic. You didn't view the church as you would view your family. You didn't protect the church, like, you know, protect the church. Like, there's something going on there. I'm going to find out what's going on.
You weren't paying attention.
I was not paying attention.
Mm.
And so I walked away from that moment of crisis where I was, bearing my soul to God and giving him what for, right?
Yeah.
And walking away with, oh, I better pay attention.
You were convicted. Yeah, you were convicted of
Yeah,
your
I mean,
equity.
this is on me. The role, obviously many of us play in not paying better attention, and so as a result, I really committed to my faith, coming back to my faith. I committed to paying attention to the church and what was going on,
Mm.
and really double down on that if I'm going to fight evil, if God's going to allow me to see this stuff, he's going to give me the strength and the grace to carry on and not to lose the faith. And that's what has happened. And so I can't ever let up my prayer life or my sacramental life, because when you do certainly this stuff, it's treacherous, and
Yeah,
you're battling evil in all its charming forms and alluring form, and so it's just it goes hand in hand, and I feel like I'm armed. I invoke the angels, the archangels always, God sent them to us, our guardian angels, to fight the battles, to protect us. And so,
A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't understand that we actually have the ability to command the angels
yeah,
and send
right.
them ahead of us. And this is something that Kat Kerr, for my listeners, Kat Kerr teaches this as well. She's a Protestant. She also has been this, God revealed this to her, that
Mhm.
we do have the authority to command the angels. Before you leave your house, before you go into a situation, you know,
Absolutely.
literally the angels can open the path for you and shine a spotlight. They can lay the groundwork if you have a difficult meeting, if you have an investigation,
Yes.
anything like that. That's their job. They're like the military, archangels.
Yes.
They're waiting for orders for us to command them. When we don't, they literally like can't do their job. That's just an interesting little aside there. I'm glad you brought that up.
And I was told by a very holy nun who said, "Parents, pray to your children's guardian angels. Talk to them. Ask your children's guardian angels to protect them, to inspire them, to be by their side, to guide them." And so, I'm a great believer in I recognize the spiritual warfare that we're all involved in, and so I'm going to use all the resources and aids that are out there in the spiritual realm.
And put on our spiritual armor every day. That's in Ephesians 6.
Mhm.
We don't want to neglect that.
No.
Um, I want to shift gears for just a second. We're actually almost coming up on 2 hours here, if you can believe it. Um, I, you're a Catholic. However, you have done an unbelievable expose on this Pope and on the Vatican. I think we're going to have a whole nother conversation about this, but just a quick, can you give us just a quick
Sure.
overview of that? Because there's some questions in the chat here. There are a lot of Catholics who are coming to this realization. You can be a Catholic and still see clearly what's happening with the
Mhm.
Vatican, right?
Sure. I've got a great story. When Pope Francis in 2013 became Pope, he was talking a lot about human trafficking. And as a Catholic, I was like, "Whoa, he's talking about my issue."
Yeah.
And so in November 2013, only been a Pope 6 months. This was, my commitment to pay attention to the church and be involved in the church that I made a number of years ago. So I went to the Vatican, went to what they call the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, which is the Vatican think tank. And it's in the Vatican, right next to the Vatican Gardens, not far from the where the Pope lives. And they had 80 people there at this human trafficking conference at this think tank to discuss, the problem of human trafficking. Now, initially I thought, well, I'm going to hear a lot about evil because human trafficking is all about evil, right? And I'm going to the Vatican, right? So I go there, and to my horror, I see radicals from the Obama administration, um, radicals from the UN there speaking and addressing them, radicals from the NGOs, international, and I'm thinking, Mary Grace, I'm thinking, is this me? Am I reading the situation wrong? I'm in the Vatican.
Mhm.
I'm expecting, more faith-filled approach to this, and they're talking about climate change. I'm going, what the heck does climate change have to do? And they're talking about minimum global wage. And, it's sounding a lot like communism and socialism to me instead of, you know,
Dealing with the issue.
dealing with the issue. And halfway through, there was one other person there I knew. And he turns to me and goes, "Liz, are we the only pro lifers here?" Well, we're at the Vatican, at a Vatican sponsored event. And I think
Oh,
yeah, that says it all. So then, unbeknownst, all of a sudden, this group of 80 are going to meet the Pope, Pope Francis. And it's not like the Congo line that you see, where everybody shakes his hand and moves down the line. No, we were in his presence for, I think, about 20 minutes, close presence. We
mhm.
came in a bus right outside where he lives. He came out, talked to all of us, shook our hand, took pictures. And so when he's coming out of Casa Santa Marta, which is the, apart hotel that he lives in,
Papal apartment. Yeah.
yes, he's the, he doesn't live in the apostolic palace. He's, a people person, so he's going to live in this apartment. So he comes out, and I am literally waiting for my heart, my soul to leap, the man in white, meeting the Pope. And he's walking out, and there's, I'm feeling nothing. And I'm thinking, I don't sense holiness. I don't, but maybe it's me, right? I meet him, I shake his hand. I'm kind of expecting, soul to soul connection. Again, nothing. And
Interesting.
so, and yeah, and so I was really kind of rattled because again, I didn't trust that it was. I thought, well, it's me, not holy enough, prayerful enough, you know. But on the way in the plane home, I was there for 3 days, and on the way home, I'm going to watch what's going on under this pope and in this pontificate. And I just made a commitment to myself
Yeah.
because I really wanted to test what I saw, what I felt, what I heard. Um, is I'm very concerned that this is Marxism coming out, and I was very concerned that they didn't start with a prayer, they didn't end with a prayer. I mean, just um, and this in the topics and commentary from the people at the conference were off the wall. So as a result, I started writing, speaking about my concerns about the Pope and studying about the New World Order, studying about Davos and globalism, of which I knew nothing because we were told, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
In learning about climate change and
Mhm.
and what the agenda was of the Davos and Bilderberg and everything, and then watching the 50 or so conferences that he had over the last 8 years at the think tank, and who he had invited, who were people like Paul Ehrlich, who wrote The Population Bomb, who was pro-abortion.
These
uh,
are anti-population advocates.
uh-huh.
Depopulation. Yeah.
Depopulation. Jeffrey Sachs, all the Soros agenda
Mhm.
was being promoted by this Pope. Of
Wow.
course,
Yeah.
I can go on and on. So
Yeah.
as
I
a
mean,
result,
yeah.
and as a Catholic, you're not supposed to, openly criticize the Pope, but I went at it tooth and nail because to me, everything he did was anti-Catholic. Um, it was an attack on the human soul. He was promoting things that were not part of the Catholic uh, magisterium and the deposit of faith. He was elevating pro-abortion people, abortionists. Emma Bonina. He was promoting her, elevating her. I mean, we could talk for hours on this,
Yeah.
but I realized that too was my responsibility. That I was given the gift of seeing firsthand early on the papacy.
Yeah,
What?
God took you right there into his presence. It wasn't
Yes.
just conjecture. Yeah.
It would have taken me 2 or 3 years, and then I still would have thought, well, maybe I'm reading the situation wrong. No, I wasn't reading it wrong. I was, it was right. Um,
Yeah.
so now we know, um, and I consider he is providing, to my horror, the moral voice for the climate change, the moral voice movement, the moral voice for the global agenda, for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are
Yeah.
pro-abortion, and
Well,
so.
for the medical agenda too, as well.
Oh, yeah, he had a health conference where he invited Tony Fauci,
Yeah.
Chelsea Clinton, Burla of Pfizer. I mean, I could go Francis Collins, all of them.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
promoted the vaccine. I mean, just to go on and on and on. But
Yeah.
because every week there's something else. So I'm not going to be silenced. Not going to be intimidated.
Have you been have they come out? Have they threatened you? Have you been threatened? Have you
Well, I've had some consequences of it, but I've not been threatened. Consequences of I'm probably quite toxic in some circles, but I don't care. I think it is that's my role as a Catholic to speak the truth. And as a result, of investigating this guy and the Vatican and all the other people. My faith is so deepened. I've learned about all the great popes that took on communism. I've read exhortations and encyclicals of popes that I never would have read. I've learned about China and what needs to be done in China because of his outrageous deals with the CCP.
Yeah.
So, so it has been, again, the darkness has been a huge blessing because it's, it's ironic. It's enriched my faith. And so, I mean, it's a long discussion of what he's done,
Yeah.
what he's promoted. But I'm very, very concerned because the radical left has been given a moral voice, a moral platform, and that they didn't have before.
So what you just said was very interesting, that the darkness, being exposed to the darkness has increased your faith. But you made a decision to go there. You made a decision to go deeper with God, rather than to walk away and blame God for the evil that you've witnessed. I think that's a key thing here, is because everybody has a choice. When we encounter these things, we can become passive, we can give up, we can just decide, okay, it's over, there's nothing we can do. You've doubled down and gone deeper with God and deeper into your faith. And that brings me to the next topic, which is that we have just learned uh, that Judge Jackson has been confirmed to the Supreme. Um, yeah, these senators just wanted to get out of town for the
Yeah,
holiday.
yeah,
That's all they wanted. They didn't want to put this on. There was no rush. Why did they rush? Um, yeah, this is what we're just learning. I've just been informed by one of my close friends, and she said that a motion to reconsider has been filed. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but yeah, these are, and I think it was 53 to 47, which means that we got some. Uh, I don't know if any of the Republicans voted in favor. This is, yeah, this is incredibly sobering to get this news.
it is. It is. I guess at this late date, it was not surprising, um, but it doesn't deter me. Um, no, I mean, we now know where we didn't before, what her agenda is. And so we'll continue to watch her like a hawk, um, watch her rulings. Um, and who knows what God has in store. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and you lose battles here and there, but you keep forging ahead.
yeah,
And uh, the effort had to be made. And I said to Steve Bannon, I said, there needs to be a national conversation about child pornography. And I think that really has begun, because of the nomination of this judge. Obviously, I want more than just a national conversation.
yeah,
Um, and I want a judge appointed to the Supreme Court who will fight to protect children and to outlaw this, absolutely evil that is around us and everywhere we look. So we'll continue the battle. I know that opportunities will be placed in our path, and we'll just keep forging ahead. It's sad news, but a lot of people, a lot of Americans let their voices be heard, and for that, I'm extremely grateful.
yeah, yeah. You're right. This battle is lost. The fight is not over. What are your thoughts on Amy Coney Barrett, since she was confirmed to the bench? Are you happy with the way that she's ruled on some things, especially with regard to some of
COVID. Yeah, I mean, with regard to the mandated
uh,
vaccines, I mean, I'm not. I've been, um, that some of those decisions are frankly infuriating. I think she has not um, uh, uh, ruled against the mandates in the vaccines. I think for government officials, I'm not. I didn't. pulling up um, on her recent record. Um, Look, you know, I kind of feel like, the elite in D.C., the Judicial Crisis Network, the Federalist Society, the ones who, nominate the Amy Coney Barrettts, and the DC insiders. I kind of share Robert Barnes. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Robert Barnes. He's a tough trial lawyer who has a
Yeah,
podcast. I'm with him. And like, I want somebody who's, had experience in life, who's really had to fought to get through school, who hasn't had things handed to them. I'm sure, I know people who love Amy, and that think she's terrific, and she's probably a very nice person. But, we're in a battle. In the laws of this country, shape conduct and behavior and protect us from evil. And I want street fighters. I don't want intellectuals. Everybody says, oh, she's Judge Jackson is very qualified. She's Harvard this and Harvard that. Enough. And there's an old saying, you can always tell a Harvard man, but you can't tell him much. I mean, this. I mean, I'm just. I'm
yeah,
not. I'm not impressed with that. And so, uh, America's got to learn its lesson. Hopefully, Donald Trump has learned his lesson, and and the other Republican presidents who really didn't appoint tough jurists in the brand of a Scalia or a Clarence Thomas. But in my mind, that's what we need, and so we have much too much of Ivy League and not enough of Main Street um, in Washington D.C. in those that make our laws, and so I'm
yeah.
I'm not impressed.
And
Yeah,
you mentioned Trump. You're talking about with the appointment of the SCOTUS justices,
yeah.
the judges that he confirmed. Yeah, because the Federalist Society
The jury's still out. The Federalist Society.
has a list.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, the list that they draw from.
yeah.
I mean, it's yeah. I can't.
I'm
It,
just done.
it's
I'm
mad.
done.
Yeah,
And the American people are done.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like, give us somebody on there who cares
yeah,
about this country and isn't so owned by the elite ideologues. I mean, just and
yeah,
just so we'll see what happens.
yeah.
There's many battles ahead,
Hmm.
and it ain't over till it's over, right?
Yeah, and I, sorry, I didn't mean to hit you with that, but you're going to find it out sooner or
Yeah.
later. But I just wanted to get your to weigh in on it. Um, as we depart here, some people have been asking just on a very practical level, if somebody is being victimized, you know,
Yeah.
if there's a child that has been kidnapped, if they're in custody of somebody that's trafficking them, some people are asking, is there a symbol that you look for, or what are the signs that you look for, or a hand
Okay.
signal? Is there something that a child can do to indicate to people that they are in trouble? Um,
Well, there
Practical level.
certainly with your own children, you need to establish signals, signs, code words, um, and and be hyper vigilant without moms up and down the street like there used to be, watching neighborhood kids. We just and I know the cases of stranger abductions. They can sit behind a bus as the kids get off of the bus and grab them. So not
Wow.
to frighten people, but um, you have to. There's lots of great material if you go on missingkids.org. Things that you can tell your kids. Research, where the stranger danger. I mean, often most of the abuse happens in the family. Let that be said, by people who are known. I strongly say never let your kid go on an overnight. I don't care how well you know the family. Never let your child go on an overnight. Period. End of story. Um, and uh, and listen to your children. You may be driving the kids in a carpool, and you hear this conversation, unrestricted, unguarded conversation with the kids. I don't like that teacher. He's kind of weird. He gives me the creeps. Those are kids' words to, or I don't like, to listen to your children.
Mm,
As we said before, kids have that innate wisdom, that
yeah,
innate sense of justice. Um, keep your there's nothing else. You cannot trust, frankly, anybody. I don't, after everything, you can't trust anybody, and you have to guard your children with information that's age appropriate. There's lots of information that's out there. Missingkids.org is one place. There's a great organization, that National Center on Sexual Exploitation, that it's called NCOSE, NCOSE. That's the initials of the organization. Great organization, great programs that they do, advocacy that they do. So those are ones that I trust to really give parents a lot of
okay.
good information.
So really, really get educated. And, I have a friend who tells her children they go to school, they go to an online academy, but they're 15 and 14, her boys. And she said, when they are having conversations, doing online games, whatever, that they're absolutely not allowed at all to have any conversations about sex and sexuality. And that if a teacher starts talking about that, that they're to report it immediately. Um, is that in general a good policy? And
Yeah,
how do parents keep track of what's actually happening on the internet?
I'm telling you. Well, first of all, you really have to monitor. You've got to get filters. You've got to constantly monitor phones. On the family plan, there's all sorts of software that you can put on your kid's phone to watch their texts. I would encourage people to do it. I would also send a warning shot to parents about SEL and CRT. They're subtly putting it into the curriculum. Your kids may not know that it's what it is, and they'll drape it and wrap it in all sorts of nice language. But this agenda is they're just going more subtle, more really, I think, concealed in their effort to continue. It's nonstop. They're going to
CRT is
continue.
critical race theory. What is SEL?
SEL is the social emotional learning, which includes the umbrella that includes gender, ideology, all that stuff. And um, you've got to talk to your kids. You've got to listen to your kids. You've got to find moments where there's unscripted conversation, and because it's game on with the radical unions in schools. It's happening everywhere, even in the most conservative
Yeah,
communities.
yeah, and, speaking of unions and speaking of school boards, somebody was mentioning in the chat here, there's something that, parents have started doing, which is going after the surety bonds of school board members,
Mhm.
and elected officials. I wanted to bring that up. There's a website called Bonds for the Win, BONDS for the Win, FORTHEWIN, bondsforthewin.com. They have Telegram groups in every single state where they educate you. They've done a lot of the homework on this. It's important that you understand this. I mean, talk about getting involved at a local level. You can go after elected officials as well with affidavits and court filings against these people. And this is not like bringing a lawsuit where you have to hire a lawyer and spend a lot of money. A
Yeah.
lot of this is grassroots work, boots on the ground with individuals. So I wanted to get that in there because when you find this in your school, if you hear this happening, if you see it happening, everything from masking the kids to the curriculum, it is
Mhm.
essential that parents get to the people who are making these decisions, and that is with the bonds. So,
Yeah. I
Liz,
would question curriculum every step of the way. Don't be afraid to be that nagging, unpopular parent. You got to let go of that stuff. You've got to be in there questioning everything.
yeah, you can't be worried about being unpopular, right? Because
No.
your child's future is really at stake here. Liz, this has just been an amazing, enlightening delightful conversation, and we're actually over 2 hours here. It's hard to believe that the time goes so fast.
I know.
I'm just delighted that you reached out to me and that we've connected and that you're able to come on the show. How can our listeners follow you? How can they follow your work? How can they find you?
Well, I am, my website is Yore, my last name, YORE, children.com. And I post there frequently, post a lot of my videos there as well. And I'm on Getter, Truth, Twitter, Gab under Elizabeth Yore. So you can find me in
Okay.
those places.
I have your Twitter handle up here, Elizabeth Yore, but it's the same on Getter and Truth Social. Okay,
Uh-huh.
great.
Yeah.
Are
Mhm.
you on Facebook?
Yes, I am. I don't post much on Facebook anymore, but
Okay, okay. We would love to have you back on the show. And,
thank you. I would
and
too.
everybody just remember you can find Liz Yore as a regular contributor on Steve Bannon's War Room on Real America's Voice. He has her on a lot, and I'm sure that he'll have you on to weigh in on this recent Supreme Court decision. Um, so and everybody, as you're coming in, as you're taking part here, please just remember to keep Liz Yore and all of the people who are leading the charge out there in your prayers,
Thank you.
because we absolutely have to lift them up in prayer, because this is really hard work, and sometimes it's thankless work, and they're constantly under spiritual attack, and so we want her to have the protection of God in this. Pray Psalm 91 over her. Somebody's asking for the site. It's bondsforthewin.com. I put it in the chat. So Liz, thank you again for being here. Everybody, this is Mary Grace Media. You're on Real Talk with Mary Grace. And our guest today has been Liz Yore. She is a child advocate, she's an attorney, and a grassroots activist who is doing amazing things and making incredible inroads. And she just doesn't quit. She's leaning into God every day. And that is what I'm encouraging everybody to do here. Do not give up. And thank you so much for being here. I will be back on air soon. Thank you everyone for your participation. Have a
Thank you,
great
Mira Grace.
day.